Good afternoon, and welcome to Women in Manufacturing. I'm Lydia Di Liello, the CEO and founder of Capital Pricing Consultants, and I'm your host today. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Laura Di Liello, who is a retired innkeeper. And ladies, today we're going to have an opportunity to talk about bed and breakfast and why it's a great idea for women travelers to look at those. And also those of you that are astute and catching on to the same last name, Laura is my sister-in-law, and I had the opportunity to stay at her B&B many times, and it was absolutely lovely. So Laura, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lydia.
So Laura, you have a very, very unique background. You were in engineering, you're an engineer by education, and then you moved into the world of bed and breakfast. Tell the viewers a little bit about that.
Sure. So I went to college to be an electrical engineer, and I started my early career in the automotive industry. So 25 years or so, believe it or not, we were, my husband and I met at work, and we were both electrical engineers. We worked in the automotive industry doing a lot of travel. So I have a lot of experience being a woman in manufacturing and doing a lot of travel. Then after some overseas assignments in Italy and in Japan, we, like a lot of people, became a little bit disillusioned with corporate America. It was at a time of a lot of upheaval in the corporate world, and we wanted to do something together. So we ended up deciding to buy an inn, which, you know, it's a little bit Bob Newhart, a little bit of everybody's favorite joke. But we did it, and we bought an 18-room inn in Eastern Pennsylvania, and we ran it for 16 years. So it was full-time work for both of us. Very interesting work and very fulfilling. We just have recently sold it about a year ago, and now we're in our third phase, third career, as mostly retired, but also doing some independent consulting, inspecting of bed and breakfast around the country.
So really interesting kind of progression of things. And so as a woman who traveled for business, what are some of the things that you think are valuable for women who would be staying at a bed and breakfast?
So one of the main things about staying at an inn or a bed and breakfast is that you're much more engaged with ownership or management. When you stay at a hotel, you might find a great front desk employee who knows everything and gets to know you and takes fabulous care of you. But often that's not what you find. You get the new person or somebody who doesn't know the area, or, you know, what have you. But in an inn situation, it's quite often the owner, or at the very least an innkeeper who's a full-time management, who cares very deeply about who's in their building, that you have a fabulous experience. They're there to help you in whatever way they can.
So it's really a lot about personal experience in terms of building a relationship with an innkeeper to say, hey, you know, these are the needs that I have, or can you give me a good restaurant to go to, because you know the community.
Right. So it's easy to say, you know, what are the top 10 restaurants in this area? But it's a different thing to have a conversation and say, you know, I'm a woman, I'm dining alone tonight. Where do you suggest? And an innkeeper can say, oh, this place is fantastic, that you can sit at the bar, ask for so-and-so, you know, all of those kinds of things that really make a difference. Also, inns often have, you know, a small parking lot, off-street parking, well lit, instead of, you know, when you're at a large hotel and it's an 800 space parking facility, you never know where you're going to be or how far you're going to have to walk. And a breakfast is obviously a big part of it. There's usually a delicious breakfast and afternoon snacks. And again, most often an innkeeper who's really willing to work with you. If you have an early meeting, they'll pack you a breakfast, or if you have dietary restrictions, they're all about helping you figure out what you need.
And I think that those kinds of I'll say extras are so important when we're traveling, especially now, because schedules, nothing is guaranteed. Travel pre-COVID was already you never quite knew, but travel post COVID is almost a guarantee of it's not going to go the way you plan it. So what can
Right.
we do to make it easier on ourselves and more comfortable? And knowing that you're guaranteed to have a safe parking place that's well lit, that's not in Timbuktu, and you're walking in at 9:30 at night because your flight was supposed to land at 6:30, but oh well, it got in at 8:30. And by
Right.
the time you get there, and knowing that someone, when you check in, would actually care if you were starving, and well, the restaurants are closed, but wait a minute, I've got some pound cake for you from, the afternoon tea, and here's a cup of tea, something to make it so much more comfortable for us.
Right.
So I think those are really important points. And I think often that women will shy away thinking that the price point could be too much. And I think you made a great point about addressing rack rates.
Right. So if you know that there's an inn in the area you're traveling to, reach out to them. Very often they are dying to do some corporate business, but no one has reached out to them. Sometimes large corporations especially have kind of rigid travel departments that want to work with just a couple of the brand names. But independent properties need our support, especially nowadays. Like everyone is always talking about, eat local and support local. You can support local by staying at an inn as well. And if an inn is in an area that relies on business travel, they're going to be willing to work with you on, what your needs are and have some kind of a competitive rate.
So it comes down to knowing what your needs are and then asking, basically approaching the inn and saying, hey, I'm going to be in town for the next 5 months off and on, approximately this many nights. What do you
Right.
have available for me?
Right.
No, I think that's really important. And especially, as we go into the holiday season, so often we naturally just default because we're scrambling to get things set up, and we forget to check non-corporate kinds of lodging. And I
Right.
know Select Registry is, which I learned from you, is a organization that has a set of standards for inns. Can you
Yes.
speak to that a little bit?
Sure. A lot of times people are afraid to choose an inn or a bed and breakfast because they have heard stories or they stayed at a place that wasn't nice. And honestly, there are so many ways nowadays to make sure you're avoiding that. Select Registry, you mentioned, is a national organization. So every inn that is part of that organization is independently inspected. So they go through a very rigorous inspection process to make sure that they're meeting all of the needs that the traveling public has. And a lot of the things that they check for speak directly to business travel too. So you can rest assured that there's going to be high-speed internet and, dedicated parking off street and all those kinds of things. And also there are other ways for you to check if you don't find one through Select Registry. AAA still does inspections. And if an inn is showing that they're 4-diamond AAA, you can rest assured that they're going to have everything you need. Also, in this day and age, reviews are so huge that it's very difficult for an inn to be in business that isn't, up to snuff, shall we say. You can always see what people are saying about them, especially on Google.
Well, and I think what a lot of people might not know is that the Select Registry properties have much higher standards than a standard corporate hotel. So the sheets, the linens are much nicer, and the towels are much nicer. And so just the whole experience is much more pleasant. And personally, I found that traveling, it was nice to know that somebody paid attention to when I was coming and going, so to speak. So they were looking for me. And if I was coming in late, they would always set something aside or make a point to say, hey, are you going to come back in late tonight? So that they just kind of, quote, I'll say, kept an eye on me, but in a very positive way. And that
Right.
was very reassuring. So ladies, it's something to definitely check into. Now, Laura, when we were talking earlier, you said something about, make every trip count, because so often the language that we speak in when we have to travel for business is, I gotta go, or I have to go to. because we want to just check that box and be done with it. What can you share with us along those lines?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, don't get stuck in the rut of staying at a place to earn points. I understand it's important. You're saving up points so you can take that family vacation. But at the same time, you might inadvertently be making your trip now not the trip it could be. So when you stay at an inn or a bed and breakfast, look for the things that they have that you don't have at home that you can take advantage of while you're there. It's very hard today. We have so many demands on our time. People with children and elderly parents and spouses and everybody need. And we talk a lot about self-care, but it's impossible to find the time for it. But when you're away on a business trip, you might have a couple of windows of opportunity where no one else is demanding your time. So maybe the inn offers in-room massage. And now that massage you've been wanting to get for months, but could never find time for, you could slide it in. Or maybe they've got an adorable little shopping area downtown that you could hit and pick up some gifts while you're gone. Every town has some little redeeming thing, great restaurants, interesting museums, some nature thing that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And when you stay at a big hotel, you're not necessarily clued into all those things, but an innkeeper's livelihood is about their neighborhood and understanding their town and wanting to share it with you.
And that's such a key differentiator, because as we started the conversation, anytime you're dealing with a corporate entity, if we're lucky enough and you score the right person at the front desk who's a local and who's engaged and who wants to help you, you might get a great recommendation.
Right.
In my experience, generally, that's not what happens. 80% of the time it does not. And you're given a little list of, well, these are the attractions. Okay, that's nice. That doesn't help me understand
Right.
what's really available.
Do all that research yourself, which you don't have time for. Just ask, I'm here. I want to make the most of my time. What's the one thing I should go see? Or, even just being out of your element where, at home, the vacuum cleaner is calling you. When you're at an inn, let the front porch call you and do your email there. It can make such a world of difference that you come home less stressed instead of more stressed.
Well, and it's a great point, Laura, because I think we all are so geared to get this done, get the next thing done, that we don't ever just check out and say, wait a minute, this could be a totally different experience.
Right.
But we have to actively choose to do that and then take advantage of what's there.
And give ourselves permission to do it.
That's a huge one. So ladies, we're coming into the holiday season here. So let's all make a point. We need to give ourselves permission to take the time and take advantage of all of the wonderful things that are available when we're traveling to places that we, quote, have to go to for a business trip. It doesn't mean we have to not have any fun or any downtime. So this is a great way to really give yourself that opportunity and not, as Laura said, have to do the research. That's what the innkeeper's there for. We ought to be using that resource. Now, Laura, you also had an unusual situation in that you chose to work with your husband in this venture. So talk a little bit about that. We all talk about work-life balance, and to me, owning an inn looks like there's no balance whatsoever. And then when you add in that you're working with your spouse, that had to be quite challenging.
It is challenging, but I also think it can be the most rewarding thing you could possibly do. But you have to go in with your eyes wide open. Not every couple is, set up to work together. And knowing whether you are or not is really the key. But it is still always about balance and boundaries. The most important thing when you're working with your spouse is that your roles are clearly defined, and that you don't try to do each other's roles, and that you respect each other's roles. And it's also even more important that you have outside interests. A lot of times people who work apart are wanting to spend all of their leisure time together, obviously. But when you're together all the time, you have to consciously look for leisure activities that are apart. In the case of owning, it kind of works out good because if you can't both always be there at the same time or you'll burn
Sure.
out. So one person, is there on Monday and Tuesday while the other person can go do yoga or take a bike ride or whatever. And you kind of spell each other. But it is so important to really think about it and understand it before you take a leap to do that kind of thing together, because it can end a relationship too.
And I think that advice applies not just for owning an inn, but really for any business endeavor where you're going in with a partner and
Yeah,
making sure that you understand from the beginning the definition of those roles. I do this, the other person does that. Here's
right.
how we balance out the time that's going to be invested. And because just like in any work situation, there's always challenges, and then it's got to be all hands on deck. And so how you manage those things in those times. So I think that's
Right. And
important.
that's probably the biggest blessing of working with your spouse. When things get bad, when all hands on deck, you absolutely know that you can count on each other. And, that's not always the case in business, but trusting each other and knowing that that person is there for you is huge.
Well, Laura, thank you so very much for being my guest today on Women in Manufacturing. And ladies, please, I think the takeaways are, let's investigate some of the select registry bed and breakfasts available to us, get to know our innkeepers, find those preferential rates, and be able to really have a much better experience and enjoy the travel instead of just needing to check it off the list and say, okay, well, that's done. Now what? As always, folks, please remember that you have many, many choices here from Jacket Media Company, including the manufacturing podcasts that include Manufacturing Talk Radio, of course, our WHAM podcast, Hazard Girls, which highlights women in manufacturing jobs that are unusual roles for women in industry, and then Manufacturing Matters with Cliff Walden. Until next time, I wish you a very happy holiday season and look forward to speaking with you all in the new year and sharing new ideas.